From the New Smyrna Museum of History, this is Centennial Celebration.
The year was 1925, a time when flappers were putting on the Ritz at big city jazz clubs. They called it the Roaring Twenties. The years after World War I were marked by the largest industrial expansion in American history. Armed with a new sense of optimism, people rushed to Florida seeking land and opportunity for a fresh start.
Here in the small town of New Smyrna, snowbirds and fortune seekers arrived by the train road every day at the Florida East Coast Station on Canal Street. Between 1920 and 1925, the local population doubled and reached a total of more than 4,000 residents. With so many new people moving in, local officials soon realized there was an urgent need for improved services and facilities, including a new post office. Hello, I'm Linda Cody, staff volunteer here at the New Smyrna Museum of History.
And I'm Museum Executive Director Greg Holbrook. We invite you to join us for the next few minutes as we take a look at the past, present, and future of this historic building which celebrates its 100th anniversary in 2025.
The city of New Smyrna has had several post offices over the years, and we know that this certainly was not the first. Tell us about the other post offices that preceded this one.
The history of postal service here in New Smyrna dates all the way back to 1833, when this area was known as Mosquito County. In a book that lists Florida's territorial postmasters, the name of David R. Dunham comes up as the very first postmaster in the area. Now you may recall that Judge Dunham was also the prominent figure who owned the stately mansion on the Hillsborough River with 6 stone columns. According to historical accounts, the Dunham Mansion was attacked and destroyed in 1835 at the start of the Second Seminole War. Those columns were later used by federal forces as part of the Fort New Smyrna Army outpost. Territorial records indicate that New Smyrna's first post office lasted until 1837.
After the Seminole War years, Florida achieved statehood in 1845. It's also the same year that John Sheldon, former manager of the nearby Kruger DePeyster sugar mill, was appointed postmaster. John and Jane Sheldon were important figures in the development of early New Smyrna. Tell us more about them.
Well, in 1850, John and Jane bought the property at the old Fort Mound, which had been abandoned by Thomas Stamps. John, who was also the local customs collector, thought the site on top of the old Coquina Foundation was the perfect spot for a new home and business. The large wood building John and Jane raised up also became a boarding house and a general store for this area. As the local postmaster, John Sheldon would have used this location for the exchange of mail. Tragically, each of the 3 Sheldon homes at the old Fort Mound met an untimely fate. It was a tumultuous time in Florida history. The Sheldon homesteads were either burned out during Native American attacks, shelled by the Union Navy during the Civil War, or demolished simply due to old age.
We should also mention that there was a brief time when Jane Sheldon was appointed postmaster here in 1852. Jane continued to handle postal duties in New Smyrna even though the Civil War caused federal mail service to be suspended in the Confederate States for most of the 1860s. It wasn't until 1869 when the U.S. government officially restored postal service to the New Smyrna area. As we move into the late 1800s, are there other post office locations that we should know about?
Unfortunately, there's not much documentation about post offices here in downtown New Smyrna until the early 1900s. What we do have is an undated picture of a post office located in the Smith Building at the corner of Canal and what was then Hillsborough Street. The Smith Building was part of a small retail complex known as the Bank Corner, one of the most photographed locations in early New Smyrna. You can clearly see the post office lettering in the storefront window.
We're not sure how long that location was used as a post office, but we do know about another storefront that also handled mail prior to the post office here on Sam's Avenue.
That's right. In a book written by Larry Sweet for Images of America, there's mention of a post office in a store on South Hillsborough Street. The store was located just north of the Shryock Building, which today would be the site of our South Causeway Bridge and Riverside Drive. The shop owner was William P. Wilkinson, a well-known businessman who would later serve as postmaster in the 1930s and 40s.
We can only imagine how overcrowded that small office would have been. With New Smyrna experiencing such explosive growth in the 1920s, town leaders decided to petition the federal government for a new post office.
Despite initial opposition from Washington, the Chamber of Commerce successfully lobbied Florida Senator Duncan Fletcher to support a new postal facility. The headline from March 27, 1925, announced that approval had been granted for construction of a modern two-story building to be located just north of the old Fidelity Bank at Canal Street and Sam's Avenue. This was a parcel of land with some historical significance. The site is known as the location of the first schoolhouse in Volusia County. Plans for the building were submitted by Edward F. Wilson, an accomplished wartime aviator and real estate developer. The building was designed in a Spanish Mission style, featuring a front portico with 5 arches, rough texture stucco, and Wilson's signature monogram just under the roofline.
With 5,000 square feet on the ground floor and another 1,000 square feet upstairs, Wilson had enough space to lease to the Postal Service and other tenants as well. Over the years, this location was used by the American Red Cross, the Daytona Beach News Journal, Edward Wilson's real estate office, even a plumbing store.
The building here on Sam's served as the main post office for 40 years. When another development boom hit Florida in the 1960s, New Smyrna's population jumped by 20% to over 10,000 people. By 1966, this facility had become overcrowded and outdated. It was replaced by another new post office at the northeast corner of Canal and Rush Street. This is the facility that preceded the current post office on Mission Drive.
Now, in the years after the post office moved from here, what happened to this building?
The years following the post office were not particularly newsworthy. In 1965, former City Commissioner Jay Yambor bought the property with the intention of developing it into professional offices. As far as we know, those plans never materialized. In 1972, New Smyrna's Recreation Department took over the property. The building was converted into Sam's Rec Hall, an all-purpose facility designed for family entertainment. It featured a TV lounge, ping pong and pool tables, and pinball machines.
After the rec center closed, the next major tenant to occupy this building was the Utilities Commission.
That's right. In 1973, the New Smyrna Beach Utilities Commission decided to make this building their new headquarters. The interior was completely refurbished to handle customer service, billing, and data processing utilizing the latest technology. It even featured a drive-up window along the side alley. The Commission's Board of Directors used the upstairs office space to conduct business and hold regular meetings.
The Utilities Commission occupied this building until 1993, at which time it relocated to the original Smyrna National Bank building on Canal Street. Despite the historical importance of this building, the property on Sam's Avenue faced an uncertain future.
While the Sam's property stood vacant, an active group of local citizens was working behind the scenes to form a society dedicated to the preservation of local history. With an outpouring of support from the community, the Southeast Volusia Historical Society was formed in 1982. The society volunteers eventually found a new home for an actual museum in 1992. The location was the former Connor Free Library, built in 1901 by prominent businessman Washington Connor. The city of New Smyrna acquired the property from the Connor estate in 1924 with the stipulation that it was to remain a library for public use. By 1990, the property had succumbed to the ravages of time and turned into an antiquated eyesore. That changed in 1991. In a remarkable feat of historic preservation, the city moved this old structure from the corner of Washington and Faulkner to Old Fort Park. At that point, the building was completely restored and converted into a museum managed by the Historical Society. The ribbon cutting and grand opening of the new Connor Library Museum took place in 1992.
Despite its small dimensions, the building had enough space to house a large collection of donated artifacts and displays. The museum was considered an instant success, but soon outgrew its limited capacity.
As someone who conducts a lot of tours here in the museum, tell us how the building we're in today became the home of the New Smyrna Museum of History.
After the Utilities Commission, the building here on Sam sat vacant for almost 7 years and fell into a state of disrepair. Beginning in 2000, the Historical Society was offered a lease on this property by the city. Once a legal setback involving ownership was settled, the State Division of Historical Resources awarded a $290,000 grant for renovation of this building. In 2003, amid a ribbon cutting and much public fanfare, the Southeast Volusia Historical Society opened the doors to this brand new museum. The open house was a celebrated event that highlighted the museum's exhibit areas, space for an archaeology lab, and an upstairs community room that was made available to nonprofit groups.
Based on pictures taken at that grand opening, the first museum displays were very different than what we see today.
They certainly were. The museum started with a simple collection of 93 black and white photos hanging on walls and displayed on easels throughout the gallery. The photos were copies of historical pictures taken from the Zelia Wilson Suite collection. The copies were offered for sponsorship to society members and the public as a way to raise funds in that first year of operation.
Now, shortly after the museum opened, there was an unfortunate circumstance that proved to be quite challenging.
The Florida Peninsula was hit with 4 major hurricanes in 2004. Here in New Smyrna, Hurricane Charlie caused significant wind and water damage to our building. The museum had to close for several months while repairs were made.
And after reopening, the museum came back to proudly display a whole new gallery.
In 2003, a series of original documents and ledgers relating to Andrew Turnbull and the Smyrna settlement were discovered at a museum in Dundee, Scotland. These letters provided a first-hand account of Turnbull's travels throughout the Mediterranean, recruiting indentured workers for his indigo plantations. The dramatic story of the Smyrna settlement was turned into an award-winning display, which visitors can still see today.
As we speak about the museum today, this is actually a very dynamic place.
From its modest beginnings, the museum has really expanded its presence as a visitor attraction in the Volusia County area. Our main floor still features a timeline covering 250 years of New Smyrna history. In addition to the numerous video displays, there's also a gift shop where you can purchase items in person or online. We're also home to the Museum of East Coast Surfing. The second floor houses the Sheldon Research Library and a comprehensive collection of local newspapers dating back to the late 1800s.
And the museum continues to engage our visitors with new forms of education and entertainment.
It really does. There are museum tours, history walking tours, and a complete schedule of guest speakers who present different historical topics every month. The museum also puts on 2 large events every year, Heritage Day and Night at the Museum. We also run a very active website and offer all of our historical programming on our YouTube channel. As successful as the museum has become, the future is always challenging.
Maintaining and updating a 100-year-old building is a constant job that can require significant financial resources. As a nonprofit corporation, the Society has so far been able to raise funds from Volusia's ECHO program, state grants, private donations, and memberships. As we look to the future, we've come to realize that some of our annual funding tied to these grants may not always be available. Yet we still have many needs for upgrading the museum to modern standards. Going forward, it's important for us to consider upgrades to our lighting, technology, and exhibits. Much of the Society's work is presently focused on seeking additional funding for these necessities.
Looking back to the year 2000, when the Historical Society was laying the foundation for this museum, there was a significant outreach to the public for financial support. Thankfully, the business community and people interested in historic preservation really responded in a positive way to our financial appeals.
They certainly did turn out to support the museum back then, and we believe they will continue to do so in the future. Over the past 100 years, this building, as a post office and later as the Utilities Commission, served as an important anchor in the downtown business district. It now stands as an educational resource and tourist destination in the community.
Friends, thank you for joining us. There's so much more to see here at the New Smyrna Museum of History, so make your plans to visit us this year.
We hope you've enjoyed this special look back at the 100-year history of our local landmark building here in the heart of downtown New Smyrna Beach. We hope to see you soon at the New Smyrna Museum of History.